Hi, welcome to ADHD Content Creator. I'm your host, Jennifer, aka Vegan Tech Nomad. Today I'm joined by a super exciting guest, Jennifer. She's someone who found me online. And actually, Jennifer, do you want to share how you found me and what drew you to my content?
Yeah, I had been following you, I think on Instagram, for probably about a year, just kind of fangirling on your Notion content, like how to set up Notion and how to track your entire life. At first, I thought it was a little bit extreme, but I like extreme things. I am in some ways a very extreme person myself. But I thought, that's not for me. I'm not going to spend my life tracking my life. But then I started noticing that I didn't always know where my time was. And all of my digital files were scattered very on across all of my devices. Like I had my phone, I had Google Docs, I had this, I had that. And over time, I started to see like, oh, it makes sense to put all of your stuff in one place. And Jen has figured out the kind of design to have the second brain thing, and you have thoroughly tested it and practiced it. And then I saw your webinar about how you organized all your stuff for your job. And again, I really respected your system. And then I realized I don't have a system for good habits around work and documentation. I just kind of throw everything everywhere. And it got to a point where I'm like, I can't go on like this. So when you advertised that you were doing a class on how you set up your Notion stuff to be a second brain, I was like, okay, I need to get involved with that. And then you said you were doing a content creator class, and I'm like, oh shit, I need that too. And then you said you were training for a marathon and you weren't sure what to do. And I'm like, okay, that I can help with because I'm an ultra runner and a coach, and I love helping people reach ambitious goals. And so I sent an email to you asking if you wanted to do a trade, coaching for coaching, goals for goals. And you said yes. And I was delighted. And then then I took your class and it was awesome.
I think this story just highlights the incredible opportunities that content can bring your way because I never, even if I was struggling with my training, I never would have thought to hire a coach or anything. So when you emailed me, I was super excited because like I've never really had one before. And you gave me this whole plan and I was like, okay, I don't need to think or research. I just do. And it was so easy. Jennifer, I want to hear a little bit more about your mission, actually. You mentioned ultra running and I'm curious what you want your content to help other people with.
So yeah, I'm an endurance athlete and I originally started running back in, gosh, I think it was in 2000 and late. Probably like 2012, I had a little voice inside of me that said, and now you will run the Quad Gypsy, which is a race in California that's kind of famous for being, it's the Dipsy Trail in Marin, which is a 7-mile trail that goes from a town called Mill Valley to a town called Stinson Beach. It's astoundingly beautiful. It's the oldest trail race in America. So when you do it once, it's 7 miles. When you do it twice, it's an out and back. It's 14 miles. But when you do the Quad Gypsy, it's an out and back and then an out and back again. And they say that the first out and back is all about your physical training. But the second out and back, that's a spiritual journey. And I've been hearing about the Quad Gypsy for a long time. And when the little voice said, and now you're going to run it, I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. I don't want to do that. But I couldn't really shake little voice. It was persistent. So ended up not doing the Quad Gypsy because I broke my ankle. I ended up doing something called the North Face Endurance Challenge, which is a 50-mile race and where you run from San Francisco to Stinson Beach and back. And again, astoundingly beautiful trail race in Northern California. And I trained myself for it. I had all these fears around it. Like, what if I get lost? What if I get stuck in the dark? What if I meet somebody who's like living in the woods? What if I meet some dude out there who's living in the woods and I'm alone on the trail and it's foggy and it's scary? What if I try to get to my car and something's wrong? What if my headlamp goes out? I had all these fears. They all came true. And it was fine It was fun. I got lost and I found my way. I went to my car, it wouldn't start. I called AAA. I met some dude who was living in the woods in the middle of the night in the fog on the trail alone. And we just passed each other and it was fine. So I was like, okay, wow, that was an astounding experience. When you encounter baby foxes out in the middle of the night on the trail, they make a sound that sounds like Satan screaming. And there's all these sounds out there that are so creepy. But then you're fine. It's just nature. So I became an ultra runner and I did all these races all over the world. I ran around Mont Blanc in this race called UTMB, Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc. I ran across the Grand Canyon in a run that's called just a personal, you do it yourself. It's not an organized race, called the Rim to Rim to Rim, where you run from the length of the Grand Canyon up to one rim, you come back and you do it again. It's like 42 miles. I just did all of these runs and races and I absolutely loved them. I got fit. I did the San Diego 100. And what I found is that the community around ultra running and trail running is just so supportive and interesting and not what you would expect. And I loved it. And I loved being out in nature and I loved seeing how far I could go because all the fears I had around it were unfounded. You know, it's not that they didn't happen, but they didn't take me. I was strong enough and resilient enough and resourceful enough that I could overcome them. I was better than I thought. We all are, but you don't know until you're tested, you know? And the other thing about ultra running and endurance running is that it's a great testing ground. It's kind of like in software development, you have a staging environment in GitHub where you test your software before releasing it to the world. Ultra running was like a testing ground where I could find out what I'm made of. What am I capable of? Can I actually do things that people are telling me is impossible? You can't do that. You can't run 100 miles. You'll get hurt. You can't run 100 miles. It's impossible, right? People would say this shit. But I was like, but what if I can? But what if I can? What if I put in the work and I train every day and I get a coach? What if I can? What then? And what I found is that when you go out there and you train for something is one of the few things in the world where what you put in is what you get out. The rest of life is kind of crazy. You can work really hard and still fail. You can put all this energy into your job and still get fired. You know, all of these things outside in the world are actually out of our control. But with fitness, what you put in is what you get out. So if I show up and train every day, I'm becoming more fit. And when I become more fit, I can finish a race or I can run 100 miles. That's a fact. But what everybody else is saying, it's impossible. You can't do that. You're too something. You're too Asian. You're too blonde. You know, you're too female. You're too weak. Whatever people are saying, they're making that up. They don't know. And they're just projecting their stuff onto you. But what I found is the more work I put in, the more I got out, the more I could do stuff that people said were impossible. And then I could take all of that and bring that experience to my career. And then I was able to do things that I had no business doing. Like I'm a startup founder and I applied to Y Combinator. I didn't go to business school. You know, I don't have a technical background. I don't know how to code. And I had the chutzpah to apply to the hardest accelerator in the world. When I applied, there was 100 spots and 30,000 startups that applied. Well, I got an interview and then I got a rejection letter. And then in that rejection email, there were a couple clues about what I should try next that they would invest in. And then 6 months later, I got in. And all of that confidence came from attempting to run 100 miles, putting in the work, and then finishing the race, doing it. And so that was one of the things that endurance running like really taught me, that I am capable of so much more than the rest of the world thinks I'm capable of, for sure. But then more than even I think I'm capable of. And it's only that little voice saying, no, now you're going to do this. And following it, that I was like, okay, seems crazy, but I'm going to listen to the little voice. So that's how I got into ultra running. And then that kind of turned me into gravel biking and doing the same thing on my bike. And so now after doing some of the longest, hardest bike races in the world in the backcountry, it's called bike packing. Now I'm attempting to do the hardest race in the world, which is 3 of the hardest trails in America. When you do them all in 1 year, it's called the Triple Crown of bike packing. And that's what I'm training for. That's why I took your class, is because I want to be sponsored. And in order to be sponsored, I need to raise approximately $100,000. And this is a sport where there's not a lot of money. No one does that. There's no athletes that are making that much. Female athletes don't get sponsorships like that, full stop. And then this is such a niche sport that has no real sponsors. So the idea that I'm trying to get $100,000 in sponsorship so I can do the hardest race in the world, that is crazy. But I know that if I learned how to create content in a methodical way with Jenn, and then be operational in how I approach this business, learn how to set up my spreadsheets and track my sponsorship dollars and just keep chugging away with Jenn, then I was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I am giving myself the best possible chance to be successful.
That's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing. I want to just call out a few things that you said that I heard, which you got into running and you want to make content about basically challenging people's pre-existing beliefs about what they can do. And when they find out they can conquer all these fears and they're strong enough for it, it's like they feel empowered to bring that energy to other areas of their life as well. Because I always thought of the mind and body as separate. So I was thinking like, I need to be more confident, I need to be more secure in myself, which means I need to journal and do all this work. I didn't realize that you could push yourself physically and safely, of course, and then that confidence would carry over mentally as well.
Yeah, you're close, right? Like conceptually, you have the idea. The only thing that I would change a little bit is we are so programmed with this like patriarchal view of the world that when you're doing something ambitious or you're following creativity and you're following curiosity and you're asking yourself, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder what that would be like. I wonder how far I could go. That is a kind of feminine way of approaching the world and your experience in it. But when you start using words like conquer or push, that is a very male and patriarchal. It's like, oh, if I'm going to explore my capacity for something, if I want to explore my ability to run a marathon a little bit faster, there's this thing that you just described that happens in our brain where we're like, oh, so I'm going to have to push. I'm going to have to conquer. I'm going to have to, it's going to be forceful. I don't do it that way. That's not how I've been successful. And it's not how the coaches and the runners who are in my kind of group, that's not how we approach things at all. The surprising thing that nobody really expects is that some of the most successful athletes in the world, especially in the world of endurance sports and ultra running, which I think is a really interesting zone to watch, is they're not breaking world records and doing things that have never been done before because they're pushing themselves. They're doing it because they're very curious in their approach. I wonder how far I can go. And when they show up to run every day, like for example, my first coach is this amazing athlete named Joe Grant, who's more poet than his endurance athlete, but he's sponsored by Arc'teryx. He's done some of the most challenging things you can do as an athlete. And he just walks, if you're familiar with Boulder, there's these rocks called the flat irons, and they're very steep. And it's a Boulder thing to just walk up them. But if you fall, you will die. But you can do, it's physically possible to do it. It's just incredibly dangerous. And Joe and his friend Anton will just walk up the flat irons because they're such good athletes. But when Joe was coaching me, to do my first 100-mile race, he's like, listen, I'm going to have you run every day. I'm like, cool, no days off, no recovery. He's like, run every day, but you're going to run by feel. So as you leave your house to go for your run, you're going to check in and say, how am I feeling right now? And then if you're not feeling good, just take a couple more steps and then check in again and say, how am I feeling right now? And if you're not feeling it, if you don't feel like running that day, for whatever reason, physically, spiritually, you're just not feeling it, you're just going to turn around and you're going to go home. Go see, but then if you're not feeling it, don't force it. And it's so obvious, but this is so contrary to how most people train, because they're like, I got to conquer the mountain. I got to conquer this goal. I got to push. No, you don't. Because if you push yourself on your training, then you're going to crush your spirit. And then ultimately your body's going to be like, I don't trust this person who's driving me because they keep crushing me. They keep pushing me. And so when you actually need to push, which is during the last 6 miles of your marathon, your body's like, I don't trust this person. So it's actually, the way that you do the impossible thing is by being very kind and gentle with yourself and constantly checking it. It's like compassion and self-kindness as a strategy. And so I think that's a really important thing to put out there because, I know you were really stoked that I was able to put out 30 pieces of content in 30 days. And, not everybody else was able to do that. And I'm using the same compassion, self-compassion and self-kindness as a strategy there. And so, that's one of the ways I was able to do all of the steps and the super cringy things that is important. The important first steps as a content creator is I'm very kind to myself as I'm putting this stuff out there. And I'm like, oh, I'm nervous. I don't like how I look on camera. And I'm like, well, do you want to take it down? It's okay if you do. Self-compassion and self-kindness will get you very far.
Thank you so much for sharing that story and for, calling out that use of the word conquer, because so many times I feel like we often use words and then we don't stop and think like, wait, is this actually reflective of how I'm feeling? Or is this just something that people say all the time and you don't think twice about it? Because you're absolutely right. Like, I struggle with a lot of perfectionism sometimes when it comes to posting content, but the way I deal with that is with curiosity. What happens if I post and leave it up? I want to explore what would happen instead of like, oh, I'm going to like be grinding and like, force this success to happen. It's more like, oh, let's see what happens. So
yeah, the curiosity is so important. And then I think it's also important to have humility and, with the curiosity, because one of the things I learned from you is that you can't really tell us what to post in the beginning. You can give us guidelines, but you don't actually know what's going to resonate until you just start doing, right? Because we all have our own personalities and our own styles. And so until you start just kind of putting stuff out there, you just have to see what does our audience respond to based on our unique personality. And so you put something out there and then just like, wait, give it a minute and let's see how people respond, and don't assume that you know the answer. Like, have humility and be open to the fact that you don't know. Nobody knows. And so that was also something I picked up in your class is like, just have humility and curiosity. Don't think that you're going to know how it's going to turn out. Get curious and then put it out and then see what happens and then try to understand after the response, the audience responds, and try to understand, I wonder what about this video that people are responding to, and then come up with an idea or a theory and then test it again and then look at what happens and then keep testing. I think there's a lot of this is how I learned to launch a startup is you can't really control how the world's going to respond to your idea or your product or your service. It's out of your control. The market is insane. People are insane. They're irrational. They'll say one thing, but then they'll do another. So it will drive you crazy if you try to control, if you spend all this time making this perfect thing and then you're like, okay, I'm going to put this out there and everyone's going to love it. Not necessarily. But if you come into it with the intention to be curious and then you want to learn, well, then it becomes very liberating again, because I love learning. You love learning. And so if the whole goal is to learn, not get followers, to learn, not get customers, then ultimately you're going to just keep learning and learning. And then ultimately you're probably going to figure it out, or you're going to become really smart in the area. Either way, it's a win.
I wish there were more female founders talking about this, because all that I'm hearing in the startup world is like, we're going to dominate the market. We got to be aggressive. We have to scale. And what you just said makes so much more sense to me, but like, I'd never heard of it put that way.
Yeah, I had some great advisors, and one of them advised, we were talking about what kind of values successful founders have. And by successful, it's like the ones who don't burn out. And the values that because he went through a lot of pain with his startup experience. blew through a lot of money. He was co-founders with Eric Ries, who wrote the Lean Startup. And so he was with the best people, this Midas brains on startups, and they burned through a ton of investor cash. And it was painful because that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to succeed. And what he taught me is that if you go into this valuing, like be intentional about what your values are. And if you go into this with a value around learning and a value around honesty and a value around humility, you're going to really increase your odds of being successful, because those are all things within your control. And most founders are not trying to learn, they're trying to win. Most founders are not being honest with themselves about their activities. They're just doing stuff that's easy for them, but they're not necessarily doing the things that are going to lead to getting customers or getting smarter. Because that involves a lot of failing. And as founders, we're not really truly encouraged to fail, because it looks bad. And it means that what we're doing is not working. We'll internalize like, oh, I suck because I'm failing. And it's hard to deal with that, right? I suck. It's the same thing with content creators. But if you go into it with humility, the intention to learn, a lot of honesty about this is working, this isn't working. And you're measuring real stuff. And then with a lot of humility, I don't know anything. I don't know. No one knows. I don't know if this is going to work. No one knows if it's going to work. It's incredibly risky. No one talks about not knowing. But if you can be honest about that and kind of own the risk, then you increase the odds of your success, because now everybody can actually help you. And it's an honest and mature way of looking at the endeavor. And so I try to remember that as a content creator too. I try to come into it with the intention of learning, not gaining followers or like. I try to measure real shit and be honest about the results. Like, yeah, most of my videos didn't do well, but 3 of them did. I haven't gained a lot of followers, but I'm counting them to find out. I'm starting really small with my sponsors coming on board. It's $5 here, it's $5 there. But these are the real metrics that are going to get me towards my goal. So I'm being honest with them, and I understand it's going to be really small in the beginning. And then I try to be humble in the face of all I do not know, because that allows me to work with you and listen when you give me advice. I don't know, but you know more. And so it allows me to be humble as opposed to thinking I have it all figured out.
There's a lot there that you mentioned, but something that I realized as you were talking is I admired your authenticity and honesty so much, because I can tell it comes from a place of confidence. Like while you're talking about being humble, you're also very confident when there's something that isn't working for you. Or like, for example, you asked me, this part of the course isn't working, like, can we do this? And you were able to ask for help. And I've always struggled asking for help because I saw it as a sign of weakness. But when you reframe it in a way of like being humble, being curious, asking for help actually becomes a lot less scary.
Yeah. Well, I could see how much work you put into the course and everything that you do. And I think we talked about our mission coming into the course from day one. And I could tell how dedicated you were to our success. And, I'm a coach, and I've been a coach for, 30 or 40 years. Like, it's probably the longest standing job I've ever had. One of my first jobs in college was a writing tutor. And I know what it's like to be that committed to your clients and your students. Like, you so want them to succeed. You so believe in them. And you also believe in your coaching because it worked for you, and you know how much you've studied your domain, right? And the act of teaching or coaching or tutoring, right? So when all of those things come together, I could tell that you know your domain really well. I could tell that you have coached people and that they've done well, and that you really care about their success. And you're not doing this to, for your own glory. Although this is your business, you're doing this because you want to change people's lives and you want to really help them learn. And so I was like, okay, well, Jenn's committed to my learning and my growth and my success. And so I'm going to share with her what I'm struggling with, because I have a feeling she's going to change something so that it works better for me, because she just wants, if I'm one of your little birds in the nest, she wants me to fly. But if I don't speak up and tell her I'm struggling with this, then I'm not going to fly. And she's going to be like, what happened with that little chick in the nest over there? I keep feeding her, but she's not flying. So yeah, it takes, the relationship takes both people speaking up in order for it to work.
Wow, I feel like that's a very community-oriented way to look at it because you saw us as having the same mission. And by you giving me feedback, it's not like you against me. It's you helping me help you.
Yeah. I knew that you believed in me and all of us. I wasn't special in the course. I knew that you believed in me and I believed in you as an instructor. So I trusted, there was that trust there that if I speak up, I wasn't expecting you to work so fast. You're like on our calls, you're like, hold on, let me fix it. Okay, you need this like this. Okay, I'm making this now. I was like, damn. You were so not just open to feedback, but you were like already doing the things I was requesting in real time. And I was like so appreciative of that responsiveness and you're listening.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciated it because I was like, oh no, like the insecurities. I was like, oh, I need to make this better, better, better. But now I'm realizing that's not coming from a place of curiosity. That's coming from a place of fear. And then your story earlier about, being empowered and challenging pre-existing beliefs. It's like I have to constantly check myself and challenge this belief that I'm not enough so that I can be the best person I can be and like get all those thoughts out of the way so that I can receive feedback well and help people better. And I want to share some observations that I noticed. So you mentioned that you were a coach for 30 years, but then you're also a new content creator, but then you also identified as a content creator. Like you said, I am a content creator, whereas some people would have said, I am an aspiring or like I am learning. So how much did seeing yourself as that identity help you with just posting content and climbing that cringe mountain?
Well, you should explain Cringe Mountain because that was one of the first concepts that allowed me to post 30 days. I think, we spent a lot of time in the first couple class meetings and co-working talking about our why. Why were we taking the course? Why were we creating videos and posting them to the internet? Why were we trying to learn how storytelling works and short form content and short form video? Why are we trying to connect with strangers on the internet? Like he really held space for us to reflect and get clear on why are we doing this. And I remember that meeting we had in class where everyone really earnestly shared, I am a software engineer and I started making videos and sharing them and telling my story, and other software engineers started watching my videos and talking about their story. And suddenly it became this like outlet for people who are really technical to kind of connect with their innate ability to tell stories and share the stories about their experience as engineers. I was one of the folks in our class, and that became, he cared so much about helping people, like basically versions of himself from 5 or 10 years ago. And I was like, that's so sweet. And he really wants to help people. I've worked with a lot of software engineers, and I knew that getting better at communicating and telling stories is just something that's helpful for everybody, but especially super technical people who are kind of shy and reclusive and aren't always regarded as creative, right? And I'm like, wow, that guy's mission is going to help a lot of people, and he's really committed to that. And then somebody else in our class was like, I'm a first generation American. My parents are immigrants, or I'm an immigrant. And I've experienced a lot of difficulty as I've assimilated into American culture. And I've learned a lot about how to advocate for myself and everything from negotiating my salary to planning my financial future. And I really want to help other immigrants. And I was like, wow, that dude's going to help a lot of people, and then somebody else in class, who really wants to help people overcome allergy so that they can have cats. And I was like, wow, she's going to help a lot of people. And so I think that conversation we had of really earnestly talking about why are we even doing this? Why bother? I think that was the thing that enabled me to take on the identity of a content creator, because it wasn't, because there's a lot of stink. Obviously, there's a lot of stink around being an influencer, and then content creator is a better phrase, but there's still some stink around it. It's like, oh, you just hang out and make videos all day and you try to get the internet to pay you. Why don't you get a real job? Why don't you actually do something valuable to society? And I think what that conversation that we had and your course, where we really explored why are we doing this, it became like an anchor. And then I was like, okay, the rest of the world's going to say whatever they're going to say. Like, Jen's becoming an influencer now, Jesus, you know? And then the hamsters in my head are going to say whatever they're going to say. But once I realized that I have a deeper why for doing this, I'm doing this thing, training to do the hardest bike race in the world. I'm going into the wild where women really aren't supposed to go. I think it's really important that women see that they can do this stuff. They can do bike races. They can ride bikes. They can go into the wild. They can go into nature, and that nature actually wants us there. And it's a place that has so many healing abilities, so many opportunities for us to just find happiness and friendship and community and grow. As people, we can become more self-reliant. There's so many opportunities out there. And those parks and those lands are ours. And that education is ours. And that experience of freedom and being a little kid again and making friends, that's ours. All that is for us. And it's so important to me to get that message out there. And I think the only way to do it is by creating content and showing people, this is what it looks like. You think it's horrible like this, because that's what it's been sold to us as. That's not what it's like. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. It's awesome. And so the only way I can tell that story is by showing it. And the way that I need to show it is in all sorts of content ways: short form video, Instagram, TikTok, and then long form documentary. The only way I'm really going to be able to tell my story is by showing it with video. And so that's how I was able to adopt the content creator identity. I'm like, I have a reason for doing this, and it's not what everybody else is doing. It's very personal. And also the fact that I was using it to become a filmmaker, which I don't know anything about that. So I was like, okay, the idea of being a documentary filmmaker is incredibly scary. But if I can learn how to do short form video and do storytelling and short form snippets, then I have taken one great leap forward towards becoming a filmmaker. So that's just what I'm going to focus on. Tell good stories, short form video, put them on the internet, and get better every day. That's how I was able to become a content creator.
A lot of what you just said reminded me of climbing Cringe Mountain, which is a concept you shared with me. Yeah, so it's basically what I heard from you is, you know, a lot of the content is going to be cringe. You were posting your daily post updates, being like, okay, the music cut out, the video didn't export all the way, like all of that. And I was like, oh, wow, she must be so confident in herself, because she's just saying like, oh, this happened, but I posted anyway, it's done. But then you shared with me, like, I know it's cringe, I just have to climb that mountain. And I'm starting to think that why, like your mission, is what's keeping you going. It's like the food that you're taking, that you're drawing from to give you more energy. And then the peak is your goal, and you know it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, the Cringe Mountain thing I think was so helpful. It was something that some other creator said, and I saw online, but she said anyone who's doing anything creative and starting a project for the very first time, in order to do that project and do that creative enterprise, the first step is you have to climb Cringe Mountain. And it was like, oh my God. Yeah. Because in the beginning, everything that you're doing, if you're doing a creative thing where you're starting a company, every single thing you're doing is so cringe, because you can't just do what you're good at. You know, you also have, if you're doing something new, you're also having to do something that's different than your normal way of doing stuff, or different than all the other stuff that's out there. You're learning, and you have to do it publicly. That's the thing. You can't do it privately, because otherwise you're not going to get the response. You have to learn publicly. And it's that public learning process that is so cringe, because the stuff you're putting out there isn't good, but you have to put out that stuff That's not good in order to get better. And once I heard this idea of Cringe Mountain, I was like, I like mountains. Like, I just have to go up it and then I get to go down it and then I'll be on the other side of it. And so, yeah, Cringe Mountain really helped. And then every time I posted something, you were so positive about it. You're like, oh, yeah, no, that's okay. I don't know. Every time I posted something horrible, you're like, oh, no, this is actually good because it blocks. Or, oh, no, that's okay because of blah. Or did you know you could blah? And I was like, wow, you are not phased at all by that Stevie and Kyla's shirt that I just shared on TikTok. And you just showed me that for my next video, I could try this. Or, yeah, it seems like the music that got put there wasn't what I wanted. But did you know TikTok will recommend something else? And every time I found something that I didn't like about something I posted, you were like, oh, no, this is easy. Oh, that's easy. Oh, we can fix it like this. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll just do what Jen's saying then and keep going.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it helped because this reminds me of a concept in endurance sports, which it's like if you want to go fast, you can go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you need to go with someone else because you and your friends.
100%. 100%. I mean, when we were talking at the end of the section about the most surprising thing, I know that community makes a huge difference, especially for me, but I was also surprised at what a difference it made to be creating content in community, both with a coach like yourself, but with the community of the people in your course. I didn't know these people. I ostensibly didn't have anything in common with the people in your class. I don't know where they live. I don't know what they're doing. And yet, very quickly, the people who were truly committed to getting better, we all kind of formed our own little pod. And very quickly, we supported the shit out of each other. And we're watching each other's videos and I'm asking questions and people in the course are helping me and encouraging me to keep going. And there were many times where I was like, screw this. This isn't for me. I'm not going to be able to figure this out. And the people in the course were like, no, that was good. That's good. It's working. I'm now going for a run. I don't run. And I was like, wait, what? You mean my mission is actually already working with my crappy videos that I'm posting? So the other people in the class, yeah, they became my kind of first audience. And so it was really helpful to hear the response and then also receive the encouragement.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that story too because there was a specific instance of somebody in the course who said she challenged her pre-existing belief, like you did with when you were hearing the boxes and all your fears came true. She challenged her pre-existing belief because she was scared of this part of the woods. But then once she went there, encouraged by you and your content, you weren't telling her to go there. You just inspired her to go there with you talking about your mission and sharing your story. And she found these cute little keychains and she was so glad that she had that experience because of you.
Yeah, it was so neat. And, again, I think we spent so much time talking about our mission and our why for doing this. And that is genuinely why I'm doing this, is to inspire people to go after something, a goal, something that's important to them, to go after it. And if that is going into the wild or into nature, that's all the better. I would love to see more women feeling like they belong in nature because there's so many benefits for being there. Put down your freaking song and go and touch some grass for realsies and see that there's magic there. And that's really my mission. And so when she did that and shared that, and she also shared that she'd started running, when she shared that, it was such a huge win for me because it reminded me it doesn't actually matter how many followers I have, how many likes I have, all of the metrics that I'm tracking. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it so I can hopefully inspire thousands more people like her to, actually go out and explore and see what they find there. And so I was like, okay, I feel really good. I'm already living my mission. It's already working. I needed your community of people to discover that, right? Because that's where you get that feedback around, is your mission resonating? Is the mission resonating? And when you find out that it is, it's the best feeling in the world.
I also want to say that I think, you want to impact millions, which is amazing, but sometimes millions start with one because to that person, you might have just changed this whole perspective, this whole life, like the rest of my life too. I'm going to start thinking about you when I ran. I'm going to like, the last 6 miles of a race, I'm like, "Ugh, what would Jen do?" And then like keep pushing. So it's like the whole life is changed because of you sharing your mission. And that's not a small thing. So even if you get caught up in the numbers, the likes, the views, the millions of people you want to impact, it's like you're already living your mission, like you said, by impacting our lives of people in the program.
Exactly. But that's why I want to work with you to create tracking documents for super early stage content creators, because one of the other things I learned from Y Combinator is all of the most successful startups in the world, the companies in the world, because Airbnb, DoorDash, all these founders went through YC. And one of the things they tell you at YC is you'd be surprised at how small your success is in the beginning. Because in the beginning, it's one user, 2 users, 3 users, right? And so at YC, they have you track your growth for sure, like maniacally, but they have you track it in percentages. So week over week growth, month over month growth. And then they set some some expectations around that. And if you're growing 10% week over week, well, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. But in the beginning, your first growth is going to be huge because you start at 0. But the second month might be smaller and the third month might be smaller. But are you going up and to the right or are you going down? And if you're going down, that's okay. That's to be expected, but maybe just try something different, right? But I think it would be so great if we had some templates where you can track the percentage change, because numbers in the beginning are so infinitesimally small. It's so small. It's one user, it's one like. But if you look at percentages, it's like, yeah, my first month I grew 100%. Cool. My second month I grew 5%. My third month I grew 10%. But the magic of compound growth is something Paul Graham talks about. And it is one of the most powerful forces in the universe is compound growth. And that happens when you're doing 2%, 3%, 10% week over week. It's like, yeah, it starts with 1 or 2 followers, but then that becomes 2 or 4, and that becomes 4 and 8, and that becomes, 16, and that becomes 32. And so I think, yeah, if we had better tracking documents that allowed us to track our compound growth, our percentage growth over time, basically turning early content creators into early stage startup founders, I think that would be super motivating for people to see their growth.
That's a good idea because I'm thinking about my current process in tracking and I just do it via a wins document. So like it's more qualitative, not quantitative, where, the keychain story, the getting somebody inspired to run, I put that in there, but I'm not sure if it's like, if it shows that up into the right graph, because it's just a feeling that you have. And then when I feel demotivated, I go back and look at it and just remember that feeling. And then that gives me energy to keep going.
Yeah, because the other thing that you taught us is to, when something goes well, try to understand what is the factor, what was going on in this video. Like for me, it was yapping in front of the camera. And, it was challenging for me to pull out trends, objective trends that cause one video to do well and the other ones to kind of flop or not do well. Because the other ones I was like, oh, making your own electrolytes, people are going to really like that because they're going to save so much money and it's so easy and no one talks about that. Everyone likes Noon and Element, but did you know you don't have to spend $1 per packet? It's just salt and potassium. You can make your own. I thought people are going to love this. I'm going to give them recipes. But that video flopped. It didn't go as well as me yapping at the camera. But if there was a way to kind of rationalize, okay, let's pull out 5 things that could have been the reason why this yapping at the camera video worked. And then let's try to, one by one, replicate that. I didn't have a document where I could track my own analysis for each of the well-performing videos, like your friend Jason described. I'm like, okay, this seems important to really not just try things, but then measure. But I didn't have a way to track what I was measuring. So I couldn't iterate in a methodical way. And I'm still trying to do that. But I think there's great potential for you with your Notion wizardry and your spreadsheet wizardry to give these tools to content creators that really empower them to be methodical, to kind of combine reason and intuition. Because you're right, it's not just about throwing stuff on the wall. It's a good place to start. We don't know. But then once you throw it on the wall, like look at why did it stick?
That's a very insightful observation that you made because when Jason, so for context, Jason is my friend who grew a lot on TikTok, like went viral. And that only happened after he looked at his videos with humility and being like, what could I improve about this? How can I look at the analytics and track all of this stuff? I invited him on the podcast too, so he's going to talk about it from his perspective, and maybe you can learn from that. But I'll keep that in mind. I took notes, and like you said, I'm going to work on it before this call ends, probably. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your feedback. I'm so glad we did this and had this conversation because usually for podcasts, there's like a specific set of questions and it's like, we're going to go through this. But I went into it with this idea of like exploring and being curious and just taking it where the conversation goes. And I'm so glad I did that because you just dropped so much wisdom that I think pretty much changed my life. So I'm grateful for you for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, likewise, Jenn. And I think if I was going to give your audience just one thing to lock in on, it's posting 30 videos in 30 days. And you don't have to be perfect about it. You can skip a day and then do 2 the next day. You can skip 2 days and do 3 the next day. But there is nothing else that you should focus on as an early stage, day one content creator. Nothing else matters than just posting 30 videos in 30 days. My iPhone is cracked. The lenses are broken. The battery dies quickly. Like I kept saying like, well, I need better equipment or I need something else. And you're like, no, you don't. Just use your phone. Just press record. And I listened to that and that's what I did. Just 30 videos, 30 days. At the end of 30 days, have 30 videos and everything else happens after that. You don't need to worry about anything else. Just post 30 videos in 30 days. And it sounds too simple to be true, but that's where the magic happens is after you do 30 videos in 30 days. So if anyone's listening to this, brand new content creator, not sure, it's overwhelming, not sure where to start, 30 videos in 30 days. Start there and take Jenn's class.
Oh, I think you emphasizing that really makes it relatable to people and gives clarity because a lot of people confuse simplicity with ease. So it's like, 30 videos, 30 days, but then it's not easy. Like you just shared all your struggles, all the doubts that you had, but it's simple. That's all you need to do. If you focus on it, the learning will come.
Mm-hmm. Run every day, but run by feel.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Jenn.
Yeah, of course. Do you want to share a little bit about this documentary you're making?
Oh, yes. So like I said, I'm doing the hardest bike beast in the world. It's called the Triple Crown, and it's 3 of the hardest trails in America. The Arizona Trail, I'm biking 800 miles across from the north of Arizona down to the border. Tour Divide, which is basically the Continental Divide. That's a trail that crosses America from north to south, starting in Canada and finishing at the Mexican border through the Canadian Rockies and the United States Rockies. And then the last Triple Crown, the third crown, is the Colorado Trail, which goes through the San Juan Mountains and connects Denver to Durango, where I live. So when you do all of 3 of those races in the same year, that is the Triple Crown of bike packing. And only 4 women have successfully done it ever. I hope to be the 5th. And I'm going to film my experience, both training and actually doing it with my phone and with like a drone and whatever else I can manage to bring with me. I'm going to try to really bring people with me on my training and my doing of it, in the hope that bringing people with me will also form a community of people who are trying to do something big. And it doesn't have to be 6,000 miles of biking. It could be a 5K. It could be marching or creating some kind of action in their neighborhoods and in their communities because they want to do something productive amidst all the political turmoil in America. It could be changing careers. It could be dealing with getting fired or taking care of a parent. It really doesn't matter what you're working on as long as it's maybe something that you could use some community around and a group of people supporting you and also going after something. So that's my hope with forming this community and going on and then bringing people into my world, is that we can all support each other and going after our thing. And so at the end of all of this, I'm going to take all of that footage and turn it into a documentary. And so my hope is that people who are curious about going into the backcountry or endurance sports or really going into a zone where they don't feel like they belong because they're female, because they're transsexual, because they're an immigrant, whatever it is, they want to go someplace where they feel like they don't belong. I am hoping that they'll see my film and relate to my experience of feeling like I don't belong and how I overcame it and what I found when I actually just put myself there amidst all the fears and all the warnings, when I actually just put myself there and didn't ask for permission anymore. It's my hope that people see that they can do that too. And that not only will they survive, but they might have the most transformational, mind-blowing, wonderful, hilarious experience of their life. So that's the documentary. It's called Ours. And I'm using your course to essentially learn how to make films. And I'm going to apply for the Banff Center for the Arts. They have a adventure filmmakers workshop. So that's my next step, and to get me to my goal of making a movie.
Wow. Now I see why it's called Ours documentary, because you're making it for all of us. Wow, that's amazing. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes for anybody who wants to stay updated. Like, if you felt inspired by everything that Jennifer has shared today, you need to get in on this documentary waitlist for when it releases. And your Instagram and TikTok, the username is fastest known Jenn with 2 N's, right?
Correct.
I loved that username because you actually picked out a bunch of different usernames and you came to me with all of them. You already made accounts for all these usernames and you're like, Jenn, help me pick one. And I was like, oh, this one sounds cute. And then you just went ahead and posted like sometimes multiple videos per day, and you posting that and sharing it with the community. Even if you're like, this video sucks, like I know it's crappy, everybody saw that and was like, damn, I need to work on my video too. So then they got reminded to work on that scary, challenging thing that they know will bring them closer to their goals. So you just like leading by example, basically.
Well, that was also one of my favorite things about your course, is just having a question, and instead of going back and forth in my head, should I do this or do that? And just all the time that people spend like noodling on things that don't actually matter. I could just call you or text you or message you and say, Jenn, help me decide. And you're like, this one. And I'm really just, okay, let's move on. Yeah, it really helps.
The importance of community and not feeling alone, which is kind of the mission of your documentary, and that's why it's called Ours. I love that. So I'll be sure to link all of the stuff in the show notes or the video description. And if all the listeners, if you could leave an encouraging comment or something that resonated with you in this episode, please be sure to comment that below. I'll be sending all of the comments to Jennifer, because you can add it to your wins doc and use it to fuel your mission and get more motivated.
Awesome. And if anybody needs any run coaching or performance coaching, you can always set me up.
Yeah, I have never been so consistent with my running until you gave me all your spreadsheets and you're like, just do this, because it just felt so fun and easy. Like I was looking forward to my runs. I have never woken up at 7 a.m. to run a half marathon before until you're like, do this. And then I did it. So thank you so much, Jen. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, just everybody be sure to check out the description if you want to support Jen. It would really mean a lot to us. And I'll see you next episode.
Bye.